Hello, welcome to Tac Chat 14. I'm Dan, your host, and today we're going to be expanding upon some of the things that I talked about last week. Namely, I talked about religion, and I referred to God with a capital G in what I was talking about, and I had a yoga friend of mine ask me, why didn't I just use source consciousness? In fact, I think I might have said universal consciousness, but we got into a conversation about it, and there's nothing wrong with saying source consciousness, and there's nothing wrong with saying God, or I like to say God with a capital G. I'm going to get into exactly where I heard that from, and that's how I finally explained it to this person. But before I get into that, I want to, what this week's episode is really going to be about, because it's very important now with what's going on in the world, is objective morality under natural law. Okay? Morals aren't relative, and they're not subjective. Me and you, humans, we can't decide what's moral and not. God with the capital G has already decided that for us, okay? And this is a part that's going to probably affect some of my atheistic friends, but there is something more powerful than man that created us. There's a benign force in this universe that is experiencing itself, and we are part of it. And if you're like a religious person and you believe in the invisible man in the sky and you can't wrap your mind around this, I'm not dissing you, because your beliefs are very similar. There are beliefs. All these different traditions are very similar for a reason, because they're really the same. Honestly, they just different names to it all. And I'm going to get into that with the Book of Enoch and stuff. But before I actually go into what objective morality is, I got to give a working definition of natural law. And again, it's not made by us. First off, it is universal and it's non-man-made. Okay, it's the binding and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of human or higher sentient, including alien, behavior. And by binding and immutable, it means it's always in effect, regardless if we believe in it or not. And if you live in accordance with natural law, you're going to have a good life. If you don't live in accordance with it, you're going to have a bad life. It's going to come back and bite you in the butt. We've all heard about karma, okay? What goes around comes around. You reap what you sow. People get these concepts. But when they hear natural law, they think it's more. They think it's like the law of the jungle. It's not. It's karmic law. It's real simple. If I said this before in an earlier podcast like a year ago, and there's a lot of people out there that put this information out there ad nauseum. It's known by some, but it's not as widely known as it should be, because it is true spiritual law. It's the law that governs our it's the consequential effects of our behavior here in this 3D reality, which includes aliens. So morals under natural law, and I'll get into this later on, are objective. We don't get to make up what's moral and what's not. And that's very important. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the conversation that me and my yoga friend had. And I'm even going to go a little deeper than that and talk about something that I see as a yoga instructor myself that I'll call the dark side of yoga. And it isn't what people think it is. It is that just all allowing, Form your mudras and breathe. Live in the moment and breathe. Don't judge anything. We want to remain in a state of non-judgment. Okay? That is complete. I'm not saying there isn't some importance to that in certain circumstances, but for the most part, that's the dark side of yoga, because they're trying to turn everybody into tranquils. Okay? If there's some evil bullshit going on, I'm supposed to judge that. I'm going to judge that. Because yoga talks a lot about authenticity. It would be inauthentic of me to not look at coercion and not judge that. Okay, non-judgment in yoga refers to, as far as I'm concerned, is I'm not judging you where you are in your asana practice, where you are in your journey. Okay, I'm not judging you where you're at in your at your level of enlightenment. Everyone's at a different level of enlightenment. The only time I will judge your enlightenment negatively is if you're so unenlightened that it's affecting my freedom or my children's freedom. But other than that, not judging something that's evil, since there's so many people in the world that like to hyphenate the word toxic, I'll hyphenate it. That's toxic positivity. That's cognizant dissonance. And if you don't know what cognizant dissonance is, it's when you are so emotionally and egoically attached to an idea of something that when you're given evidence in direct opposition of that, you go into a state of denial. Okay? I also believe it's Stockholm syndrome. We got that going on a world level, but we got it going on right now with a lot of people in this country. Stockholm syndrome, and that's a phenomenon where you develop positive emotional feelings for your captors, for your slave masters. So I think it's both going on with that, and that's not completely humanity's fault, because that's where we originally came from. And I'm going to get into that today. This is what me and this yoga guy talked about. So I told him I had no problems saying source consciousness. Source consciousness, universal consciousness, God with the capital G. But I wanted to get directly into where I got that phrase from. So it came from this book, Slave Species of the Gods. And in this book, Michael Tillinger expands on the work of Eric von Daniken and Zacharias Sitchin on astronaut theory. He talks about the Anunnaki, which literally translates to those that came from the heavens or those that came from the sky. And the Anunnaki came here. Well, their planet's called the planet Nibiru, a.k.a. Planet X. And they have an elliptical pattern that goes sort of different than the pattern around our sun, and it's like a 3,600 year. They got a 36. It takes them 3,600 years to do one loop. So one of their years is 3,600 of ours. Okay, and they're saying that it's getting close again. I don't know. We'll figure out who they are, right? So they came to this planet back then. It's said to mine gold, which Michael Tillinger asserts that might be part of the reasons why humanity has this fascination with gold, and we put so much value on gold. We value what made our masters happy. It's kind of like working in a hierarchical oligarchy. Everybody values what makes their excuse my language, makes their masters angry. Quinine. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's very good for old people who like to still exercise like we're young. But anyway, I digress. Michael Tillinger talks about that the Anunnaki came here and they wanted to mine gold. And after a while of mining the gold, they realized, hey, this is getting hard. So they wanted to create a slave species using creatures that were alive on this planet back then. And we're talking like probably over 144,000 years ago. This is a long time ago. So what they started doing is genetic engineering and messing around with the genome of the species alive at that time. And I find this very interesting. This is why I really was kind of excited about unpacking this. I hope I'm not too close to this. You look back throughout myth, and these creatures of myth, right, half man and half bull, minotaur, centaurs, half horse, half, man. Even animals, a griffin is a lion mixed with a bird. They were messing around with genetic engineering a lot. And this is a species that way back then were way, way more advanced than us. And for all intents and purposes, they may be immortal. We got cells that technically should be constantly regenerating. And unless actually killed, be immortal. But something happened where our cells get smaller and they don't regenerate. So anyway, they messed around. They made mistakes. They messed up. And then they finally got it right. They got with the hominids. And they put their DNA in with the hominid DNA, and they were able to make a slave species, aka modern humanity. Now, the brothers that did this, and I'm not going to get into the entire book, but Anil and Inky. Inky is the one who wanted to do this. Anil argued against it. And this is where I started using the term God with a capital G, because Michael Tillinger referred to, during this argument, Anil said we can't do this. There was like an ethical and moral argument going on over the ethicality of actually creating life. He said it wasn't in their mission, it wasn't in their purview, they shouldn't be doing this. Only God, the Creator, can do this. Naturally, we shouldn't be doing this. And we abolished slavery a millennial ago. This isn't right. So there's this big argument between these brothers going on, these gods. And Inkel finally convinced Anil that we'll go ahead and that we'll do it, and they're not going to be slaves, they're just going to be helpers. Well, originally, I'm trying to squeeze like a 500-page book into a podcast here. It's just impossible to do. You got to read the book. But originally, these hominids, once they finally had them set to where they could procreate on their own, us, okay? Well, we were long-lived, and they didn't like that, so they had to mess around with because normal evolution was still happening over these thousands of years, so we were getting smarter even beyond that. And the reason they wanted us as a slave species to begin with was they wanted something that was smart enough to still be able to handle tools and work, but unintelligent enough to understand what true freedom is. You got to think throughout human history, you got to ask the bigger questions. Why has there been this constant, reoccurring theme of freedom? Because slavery has been part of the human condition since we were created. And we're mimicking our masters. It's still in effect today. Okay? Not to make light of the slavery that happened in this country, which makes it even more abhorrent, because America was supposed to be the land of the free, and it wasn't for African Americans that were sold as slaves, right? People from Africa sold other Africans as slaves, and we brought them here to the country that's supposed to be free. So it's extra abhorrent. I get it. But looking at the big picture of things, we were a slave species, if you believe the Sumerian tablets, which were from ancient Samaria, which is modern-day Iraq. Okay? So we were long-lived, and it gets into they ended up mating with human women that they created because they thought human women were beautiful. The same thing happened in the Bible, and the Nephilim were created. That's the fallen angels did that. All these stories interconnect. Okay, they had Enoch. Okay, Enoch, who was beloved above all others, all other humans they created, went in between. He was the in-between messenger between them, the gods, the Anunnaki, and the human slaves. Okay, a.k.a. King Hermes, a.k.a. Thoth, a.k.a. Enoch. All different traditions, same tradition, different names. Okay, so I'm probably not doing this book justice, but I got into it, and Michael Tillinger said God with a capital G, not any of the lowercase variants, when the brothers were arguing about, is this, an ethical or moral thing to do? And so he thought that was interesting. And again, I told him, hey, read the book, Slave Species of the Gods. I have a hypothesis, and just a quick hypothesis, and that is if you go back throughout ancient history to all the different hominids that have existed throughout our world's timeline, there's different hominids that have existed at the same periods of time and at different periods of time. They were doing genetic engineering experiments on everything, and found that the hominids were more capable of intelligence with their DNA mixed with us. So my theory is if you take a look at modern humans, we're different, obviously, okay? And that's not anything racist. but Northern Europeans, Eastern Europeans, Africans, people from Asia, Asian Pacific, American Indians, you stand us all next to each other, we are obviously different. We have something in common, but we are obviously different races. There's a reason for that, because there was different hominids back then. So I really believe they just were putting their DNA into different hominids. Now we've got modern man and all these different races. That makes sense to me. And it makes sense when the Bible says we were created in God's image. They were gods to us. And who knows, maybe there's an alien species, race way above them that they considered gods at one time, but they seem evolved enough to actually understand God the Creator. So I just think that's an interesting hypothesis. But another book to read by Jim Keith, I just wanted to throw these out there. This is Mass Control, Engineering Human Consciousness by Jim Keith, who died mysteriously. He talks about the MK Ultra, which is, they've got TV shows on this stuff now. They're just putting everything out there. It's just being put out there about the mind control experiments that the VA was doing and the CIA and other government agencies were doing to see how human beings can be mind controlled. Because we're programmable and deprogrammable and reprogrammable. Believe that. That's why when we do nothing but just stare into that zombie box called the television, okay, and watch the programs that come on, we're being programmed. You know, when people start parroting mainstream news media, and that's the only information they get. I'm not saying don't watch them once in a while, because they're grooming us, and grooming is a good word. You'll be groomed, you'll know what's going to happen next, okay? But you got to get out of watching it. You got to get your information from other places. You got to read. You got to do other things. They want to lower our vibration, man. You know, they're keeping us in a constant state of fear and shame. And fear and shame are right above death as far as vibratory energy is concerned. So they're keeping us vibing low, man. You got to vibe high. Don't let the fear and shame get to you, and don't be locked into the news media. But Jim Keith talks about how it's easy to mass control a bunch of people, which is what these televisions do. And he wrote another book that's very similar called Mind Control, A World Control. These books are worth reading. They really are. They'll give you great insight into some of the things that can be happening and may be going on right now in the world. One book that I highly recommend reading is this one. It's Behold, a Pale Horse by William Cooper. He was an Air Force officer and a naval intelligence officer. He worked on subs. He's seen what he believes were real UFOs and fake UFOs. He talked about a fake UFO invasion, which we've been hearing a lot about lately. And I'll digress for a second. Ronald Reagan said this, and I remember saying this as a kid, because when I was a kid, I'm from Generation X, we came up with this TV show called V, where lizard people invaded. They were dressed up like humans, but underneath they were lizards, and they had invaded our planet to take us as food, right? So the idea came to my head is, man, you know, we got all these wars in the world, we got everything going on, all these different countries, but we're really just one race, man. We're all the human race. You know, what race am I? I'm an earthling. That's what race I am. I'm an earth race. And you know, if aliens did invade, maybe that would help bring the world together. You know, we would have unity then, because we would have to unite. And little did I know is that could very well be happening, but it isn't going to be a real alien invasion. It's going to be a fake one, because they've got technology a couple hundred years ahead of us. This is why they're kind of grooming us with all the alien stuff. All of a sudden they're releasing all this disclosure that's going on, okay? There's a guy whose work I follow, Dr. Greer. He's got this thing called the CE5 protocol, which is how to initiate close encounters with alien life. He asserts, and I believe him, that these aliens don't mean us harm. If they did, they'd have done this in a long time ago. It probably wouldn't take much, okay? I don't 100% agree. I believe there may be at least one alien race out there that don't dig us or doesn't think nothing of us. We're nothing but cattle to them. We're obviously cattle to our, rulers. We're numbers, okay? So, anyway, if there's a fake alien invasion, we're going to come together and become one world finally. And it's going to give the powers that be all the excuse they need to dump trillions of dollars into the military-industrial complex and do all these other things. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I can get on here and start talking about conspiracies all day long. We've got this scamdemic going on or plandemic going on where we got to wear masks. There's going to be a bunch of violence going on in the world. Hey, how do we use facial recognition? And the masks are covering up faces. There's a lot of, I'm looking at what's happening, and it's like I know what's going to happen next. This is like checkers to me, man. But again, I'm a conspiracy theorist. So I'm not always right. In fact, I hope I'm wrong about almost everything that I think. But anyway, again, I'm going off track. So we talked about all that stuff, and William Cooper, I read this book last July, and I swear to God, I was like, was this book just written in March? And then I seen it was written in 1990. And he's describing to the T what's happening in the world right now. This is a naval intelligence officer. So this isn't George Orwell's 1984. This isn't, that kind of a book. This isn't a fictional book. Read it. It's an easy read. It's a quick read. Read this book. You'd be amazed. How did he know this was going to happen in 1990? I find it fascinating, actually. But getting into what objective morality is, and the reason I went off on a tangent with that other stuff is because objective morality can really be explained quite simply. You have to know what your rights are. Okay, and your rights are a verb, your rights are an action, and they are any action that you take that does not bring harm to another sentient being. That is your right, therefore it's moral to do. Any action you take that does initiate harm to another sentient being is not a right, and it's immoral to do. It's that simple. It really is that simple. And I had somebody, say, well, what about drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff? Is people who do drugs hurt people? Who do they hurt? They're hurting themselves. Well, what if they rob to get their drug money? Well, then robbing and stealing is a transgression against natural law. They're not moral. They crossed the line of immorality when they decided, I'm going to hurt somebody to get my drugs. Okay? If they want to do drugs, they can do all the drugs they want. They're hurting themselves. Okay, I talked about this last week. Vices are not immoral if all you're doing is hurting yourself. They're out of balance, but they're not immoral. So someone will always throw that in there. And basically this is a good way of putting what objective morality is. The United States government has one thing right about morality. And that is, if they've got a federal law on it and all the states have a law on it and all the counties and cities have laws, on it, and it's illegal to do in every state, everywhere in the United States, it's immoral. Okay, murder, theft, stealing, trespassing, coercions on the books as being against the law. Against the law in all these states, that means it's immoral. Okay, it's also in the Ten Commandments. Murder is wrong. Ten Commandments tell you not to murder and not to steal. Well, those are transgressions against natural law, and they're illegal in every state. They're also immoral. Now, if there's something that used to be illegal but now it's legal, it was never immoral. Smoking pot was never immoral, but there was people who did life in prison. 3 strikes and you're out. Alcohol. During Prohibition, it was illegal. It's legal as hell right now. Okay? We can get into some of the other stuff that if two adults agree to do something consensually, it's moral. So I think there's places in New Jersey, and we've all heard of the Vegas in Nevada, the Bunny Ranch. Prostitution is actually legal in some states, but it's illegal in others. That means it's actually moral. If two consenting adults exchange services for money, it's moral. What makes it illegal is someone's not getting their tax cut. Someone's not getting their cut. That's why it's okay for Big Pharma to create all these opioids that kill hundreds and thousands of people every year, but you can't go sell, heroin. To me, if there's no victim, there's no crime. That's the difference between true objective morality under God's, with a capital G's, natural law, versus moral relativism, which is we say it's moral, not God. And anything that doesn't hurt someone else is moral. Full stop. It's that simple. Well, if he robs somebody to get his drugs, that's why drugs are bad. No. Robbing people's bad. He's hurting himself with drugs or whatever vice that needs to be brought into balance. It's about balance. Balance is the key. So that's what objective morality is, and it's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow because we have been raised with all these contradicting principles. In religion, there's contradicting principles. We accept contradicting principles all the time. I'm trying to think what else I can say about objective morality to really get it across. If it doesn't initiate harm, it's moral. If it does initiate harm to another sentient being, it's immoral. And it's not even debatable. There's no yeah buts after that. That's just what it is. Slavery 5,000 years ago was immoral. Even our makers, the Anunnaki, had an argument about it and said, we outlawed slavery a millennial ago, and this was 144,000 years ago. They know it's immoral. They're 3D beings in this 3D reality just like us. Every alien is. They are actually affected and subject to natural law also. They still used euphemisms for slavery back then because they're not slaves. They're going to be our helpers. Okay. Slavery is immoral 5,000 years ago. It was immoral 200-300 years ago in this country, and it's immoral today, and we are all in one form of slavery or another today, unfortunately. And that's just a fact. If you own your home and your home is $80,000, $90,000 and you've paid for it, go 2 to 3 years without paying your $1,100 a year as taxes, and for like $3,000, they'll confiscate your $100,000 home you paid for. That's feudalism. That's not real democracy. That's not real freedom. Okay? We had a monarchy that had barons and lords under, the king, the monarch. And we started out right in this country, but I think after George Washington, we kind of messed up because we just replaced monarchs and kings, that had barons and lords with presidents and governors and mayors. So we still got a highly compartmentalized, government. So we can have zero accountability and plausible deniability on everything. I think if there's anything else that I wanted to say about it, I'd be interested in what you have to say on what objective morality is. Where do you think, I'm right or where I'm wrong? I'm definitely going to leave this open for comments. So if someone, wants to comment on it, please do comment on it. Tell me why I'm right or wrong. Under natural law, morals are objective. They're knowable. I've had people say, well, truth is perception is truth. Truth is perception. And I've seen this in the yoga community too. And it's like, no. Truth is truth. Truth is truth, and it's knowable. And once known, we have to adjust our perceptions to it. Otherwise, we are in cognizant dissonance. Okay? If we can somehow teach objective morality to our children, and our children's children, within a couple of generations, this world can be completely unscrewed. We can really get it together. All we need is 1% of the Earth's population to rise in consciousness, and that's 77 million people, roughly. And that would bring us up. That's only 1% of the Earth's population. I'm not going to get into the politics of this pandemic. I know what I know regarding that. I also know that freedom is our birthright. We were born free. It's our birthright. But the way we're going, if we keep subjugating morals and allowing the immorality to go on, we're creating our own prison planet. This is literally what we're creating. A slave planet. If we become more moral, objectively moral, without the contradictions, I think that's when we'll free ourselves. You know, the only piece of advice that I would honestly and just very from the heart give is get out into nature every day. Get out into nature. This came up today. It was kind of funny. For years, like for over 20 years now, we'll go out to the woods and we call going out to nature, we call that church. Literally, that's church. Freedom is your birthright. Get out to church every day. Get out to church every day and breathe. This right here is symbolic. COVID is symbolic. The masks are symbolic. Get out and breathe. Freedom is our birthright. Our rights are immutable. I have a choice. I don't have to have something put into my body that I don't want put into my body. Okay? Just like I'm not going to virtue signal that I got a shot. I'm not going to virtue signal, that I'm not a racist. If somebody wants to accuse me of being a racist, I wouldn't even have to defend myself. You could believe that. I wouldn't even have to say anything to it. I'd have people that would defend me. They'd defend me pretty vehemently, probably. I wouldn't even have to defend myself. I don't have to virtue signal for any of this bullshit. I'm not a racist, and I'm not letting you put anything in my body. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've gotten flu shots many times. And they've helped me. I don't have a spleen. So there is some science behind it. I'm not denying that. But that was my choice. It's my choice to get the shot or not get the shot. And I am not getting this shot. Ever. The shot will not get fucking put into my body. Or my children's body. There's a lot of conflicting information out there, man. But anyways, get out to church and breathe. Breathe. Freedom is our birthright. I can't say that. It's immutable. We were born with immutable rights. Under nature's creator. It's stated like that in our Constitution for a reason, man. And it's not too late. I hope I got the point across. Peace.